There's a good chance when you imagine a deathmatch wrestling tournament, you picture the Tournament of Death. Now, Combat Zone Wrestling didn't invent the deathmatch tournament by any means, but on August 31st, 2002, history was made with the inaugural Zandig's Ultra-Violent Tournament of Death. Over the next 2 decades, TOD would evolve to become one of the most must-see tournaments every single year. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking each Tournament of Death as a whole, evaluating every single match included in those tournaments. I will only be ranking officially numbered TODs here as well. No Tournament of Death rewinds, no fast forwards, TOD versus Gorefest, or anything like that. Only 1 through 21, which is the latest Tournament of Death as of this recording. As we go through these tournaments, I will be giving you my individual match ratings 0 through 20, so look for those on the right side of your screen. I will be brutally honest in this assessment, so brace yourself and let's get into some of the most ultra-violent matches you will ever see in professional wrestling. You have been warned. Coming in last at number 21, Tournament of Death 7. On paper, this may come off as a shocker, seeing how this would be Danny Havoc's first TOD trophy win, but once you jump into these matches, you will quickly see this is the weakest TOD to date. TOD 7 has the record for the most first-round matches in the tournament's history with 7, and almost all of which showcased at least one unproven deathmatch wrestler. DJ Hyde beat up on poor Andy Sumner. Greg Excellent admitted himself he took part in one of TOD's worst matches ever by besting Ryan McBride. I do think Pinky Sanchez came out looking strong, proving himself against Danny DeMonto. Wax did his best against diehard Dustin Lee, but the only real bright spots in the first round was the Scotty Vortex Mickey Knuckles match, along with a tag team squash match seeing Drake Younger and Nick Gage beat the holy hell out of Drew Blood and Devin Moore, who were invading the combat zone at that point. But good God, by far the worst part of this entire tournament was seeing Necro bow out because Hollywood, that's in quotes, was getting to his head after being in the movie The Wrestler. So in his place was Mickey Rourke's stunt double from the movie, and it was bad. It was real bad. I get they were playing into a story, and a lot of the time I will overlook that kind of stuff, but I just couldn't do it here. Round 2 saw the matches get a little bit better, but not by a whole lot. We got 2 4-way matches where 2 people would be eliminated in each one. I will say DJ took some brutal looking weed whacker shots, sending him packing, and Wax, He once again tried his best, but you could tell his lack of experience was a little obvious here, just saying. Drake Younger and Scotty Vortex easily advanced over those two, and it was a disorganized, jumbled up match, really. And unfortunately, that would be the name of the game for match 2 as well. Danny Havoc and Nick Gage both advanced over Greg Excellent and Pinky Sanchez, and you know what? I will say Pinky did stand out among those non-deathmatch guys, but let's be honest, he had 0 chance to advance over Gage and Havoc here. Sadly, round 2 had tiny shimmers of being good, but almost nothing stood out as memorable in the end. The finals were loaded with a future who's who of CZW legends. We had Drake Younger, Nick Gage, Scotty Vortex, and Danny Havoc. I think it's easy to say this was the strongest match of the entire tournament, but really, how could it not be with all these guys involved? Havoc took a beating in these finals, and the fans were very happy to see him eventually get that win, but the whole Necro stuff just drug this down a little bit. Overall, I would at least check out this final round match if you haven't seen it yet, but I think you're safe to skip the second round, and dear Lord, bypass a lot of that first round mess as well. And at number 20, Tournament of Death 18. Now this would be the last Tournament of Death before CZW's hiatus in 2020, and we wouldn't see it return until 2022, 3 years later. The opening round saw a really awkward match between Connor Claxton and Jimmy Chondo Lion, where this body slam onto a chair brought the match to a screeching halt. The life was kind of sucked out of the crowd here, and by the time they tried to quickly end it with a bang, it felt like it just missed the mark big time. 2 guys who knew each other really well here, Schlack and Dan O'Hare, they sadly had a decent but sometimes sloppy Doors of Death match where it looked like most of the things they planned out just didn't work. Big F and Joe made his CZW debut against Casanova Valentine, and these two put on a pretty good bundles and boards match. I have nothing bad to say about it at all, but it didn't really wow the crowd. Out of the entire first round, there's only one match that I believe is a must-watch, and that was between Jimmy Lloyd and John Wayne Murdoch. And I'm marking it down right now. This was easily the best match of the entire tournament. It even saw a little bit of interference from Reed Bentley, and that helped add a little bit of flavor, I think. Now, as for round 2, I hate to say it, but it was all right, but there was nothing that stood out as a must-watch. We got a little bit of an upset with O'Hare eliminating Valentine, I think, which it was kind of cool seeing a Dojo Wars guy make it to that final round. A little, kudos for his hard work that he's been putting in. Now, I did like Connor Claxton versus Jimmy Lloyd, but as enjoyable as it was just kind of short. I do want to give props to Connor for hitting a well-timed exploding bat shot, by the way, because as you get through this video, you're going to notice in TOD history, there's quite a bit of poorly timed explosions. So, yeah, a little pat on the back there for Connor. And kind of with O'Hare, I feel like this was a tad bit of an upset. I know he's been there before, but this was Connor taking out last year's TOD winner. Getting to the finals, we saw two CZW mainstays square off in yet another decent yet forgettable match. I mean, this was the TOD finals, and look at the crowd. Look at the crowd right here, barely reacting to anything. Now, the ending did see one of the wildest spots in TOD history, though, as they took a swig of Fireball at the top of a scaffold. Claxton brought Dan O'Hare down through exploding light tubes onto a trampoline of barbed wire. Look at this bounce right here. It was fantastic to see. Now, besides that big spot in the highly entertaining Murdoch and Lloyd match, I don't think you're missing a lot here from this TOD. Now, I don't think there was anything horrible like there was at TOD 7 with Necro Butcher stuff, but watching the show back, I felt like the commentary was pretty weak. Mix that in with just poor overall audio, bad lighting, really. It wasn't an overall wonderful experience. Number 19, Tournament of Death 20. TOD 20 will go down as the shortest tournament in its history, with only 5 total matches and only having 2 rounds. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was automatically one of the weaker tournaments, but after watching this entire show, you won't walk away remembering a whole lot. And as crazy as it sounds, the opening match between the TOD 19 winner Bobby Beverly and Eric Dillinger, who was making his CZW debut, this was probably the best match on the show. They would blend several different styles into their match, seeing the Bev take the win in the end. Otis Cogar and Mickey Knuckles, they had a fine match, seeing them beat on each other with almost every weapon known to man, even a couple naughty ones at one point. But this dragged on for just a little too long, it felt like, and the only big spot, it didn't go as planned. I personally liked the Schlack and Eric Ryan match. Eric brought his trademark terracotta pots that you've never seen before in TOD, and with fresh tools of ultra violence, I think that's always a nice touch. Actually, if this awesome looking powerbomb was the ending, that would have been great, but instead we got a little bit of a weaker looking clothesline to see Schlack advance. Just like Eric Dillinger, Judge Joe Dredd made his CZW debut at TOD 20, but unfortunately for him, it was against Big Effin' Joe, who beat the holy hell out of him in this first round. They fought all over the place and incorporated a bus into their brawling, but the finish, it felt a little flat. Big Effin' Joe incapacitated Dredd, seeing the ref just call for the bell, and honestly, the fans did not seem to care for that too much. I don't recall there being a reason given why this would end up being a 2-round tournament, and I swear to God, I remember seeing somewhere on social media that there would be 3 rounds, but regardless, the final round saw a fatal 4-way match. Now, the finals weren't really bad, but there just seemed to be no structure. It felt a little thrown together and just saw everyone just destroying one another with light tube shots until the ending. And as we got closer to that ending, Beverly and Schlack would be wiped out in a spot where you couldn't even really see what happened on camera, so it came down to just Joe and Mickey. We got some exploding barbed wire bats, which did look pretty good, and then Joe would plant Mickey down with a DVD to take that win. Like I said, this wasn't a bad main event, but it felt like there was no real direction for this thing, and unlike a lot of other TOD finals, there was no big ending here. Now, I'm not saying that is required by any means, but it just felt like this match was lacking something. Also, whether this was edited this way or cut live, this show drove me nuts with the camera cuts right before the impact of moves, completely negating what you would see. That's just a pet peeve of mine. Maybe other people don't notice or care about that kind of thing, but I honestly think this seemed to be either edited or cut live, like I said, worse than any other TOD to date. Number 18, Tournament of Death 19. This was the first TOD in 3 years after CZW's hiatus in 2020, and it was filled with plenty of new and old faces from TOD history, but in the end it fell short of being remarkable. Bobby Beverly and Otis Cougar kicked the show off on the right foot, I felt, with a decent first round match, but it was nothing special. The Necro Butcher entered his first TOD in 11 years to brawl with Big F and Joe, but other than that little drip of nostalgia, this one can be skipped. And then we had Insane Lane, who entered his first TOD in 15 years and would put on a solid Shark Tooth Home Run Derby death match with Brad Cash, and while good, nothing special. And then we got Mickey Knuckles, who entered her first TOD in 14 years to put on the best match in the opening round with Orin Veidt. None of those matches were really bad. I mean, some better than others, of course, but I think you've seen a pattern here by now already. Good matches, but nothing special. The intensity ramped up just a little bit in the second round, seeing Joe and Bev turn in a fun back and forth match, but the ending came out of nowhere with a Saito suplex in the corner, followed by a running knee. I believe Lane and Knuckles turned in yet another strong match here in the second round, which had plenty of more fun and, of course, ultra violence. Eventually, though, Insane Lane's body would give out on him, sending Mickey to the finals to face Bobby Beverly. The final round match would be the best match of the tournament, which isn't always the case with TOD, so I think that's an accomplishment in my book. After brawling and smashing light tubes and chopping and getting caught in barbed wire and getting a pizza cutter used in inappropriate ways, we would bear witness to one of the scariest TOD finishes probably ever. After climbing up onto the scaffold in the ring, Bobby would bring Mickey crashing down through tubes and a flaming pane of glass down onto bare boards. No exaggeration here, Mickey Knuckles was knocked out cold, seeing Bev walk away with a TOD trophy, but look at this impact and look at how Mickey's head smacks down onto those boards. Thankfully, Mickey would walk away from this frightening moment, and without a doubt, this will go down as one of the scarier spots in Tournament of Death history. Number 17, Tournament of Death 14. This would be the triumphant return to TOD for Nick Gage after he just got out of prison in 2015. Well, maybe not so triumphant, because to this day I have no clue how or why Nick Gage was eliminated in this first round. It wasn't even a screw job or anything like that either. Now, he didn't take the pin or anything, but after such a rich history in TOD, it's kind of sad to think this would be his final appearance. The match itself was all right, seeing Connor Claxton get the win, but the most memorable part was seeing the man return. Jake Christ and Ron Mathis saw a pretty gnarly ending, but the rest of the match was pretty forgettable. Also in this first round, Josh Crane made his CZW debut against Matt Tremont in a Pits in Strips match. I mean, this match, it was fine. It felt very lackluster though, all the way up until that final sequence of moves leading to the Tremont victory. To me, the Ricky Shane Page and Danny Havoc first round match was the best match of this entire tournament. This also marked Ricky's TOD debut, which, as most of you know, this led to a very successful run in the company, even though he would lose to Havoc here. In round 2, we got a shockingly mediocre match between Danny Havoc and Matt Tremont. They've had several barn burners in the past, but this one, it just doesn't stack up against the others I've seen. But damn if that ending did not look like it hurt. The Jake Christ and Connor Claxton match wasn't the bloodiest match in TOD history by any means, but I thought these two did a good job with the limited weapons that they ended up using here. Claxton would end up securing that win, and he would be headed to the finals in his first career Tournament of Death appearance. Unfortunately for him, he would be going up against the bulldozer Matt Tremont, who was looking for his first TOD trophy since his first appearance at TOD 10. As much as it pains me to say this, and it really, really does, this happened to be one of the weaker finals in TOD history. It was slow, and even though it had a couple of decent moments, it lacked any real memorable ones. And I can't remember too many finals which just left the fans booing at the end.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this match and the winner.
This tournament will go down in history as Tremont's first and only TOD win, and it's so deserved, by the way, but I wish it ended with more of a bang. Number 16, Tournament of Death 12. This may not be the weakest first round in TOD history, but it is sure up there. In fact, I think this tournament was completely carried by just 2 matches that we're going to get to soon. But on to that first round, Ron Mathis eliminated Joe Gacy in a relatively decent opening dog collar match. Danny Havoc would just about kill Rory Mondo in this mummified barbed wire casket match. After winning the match, Danny was going to light the casket on fire, but yeah, it was pretty lame.
What?
Lucky 13 versus Scotty Vortex was on its way to being the best match in the opening round, but sadly it was ruined after a bad cut early on Lucky 13. Originally the match was called right then and there, but after taking a very long time taping Lucky up and talking about it, they tried to finish things, but it was completely snake bitten at that point. It did not end well at all. DJ Hyde then lost to BJW wrestler Takumi Tsukamoto, who was making his United States debut. This match got a lot of boring chants, and besides a few bright spots, this didn't really stand out that much, and not to mention another weak finish. I was hoping Scotty Vortex and Ron Mathis would finally get this tournament going in round 2, but this was another miss. They wound up bringing a shopping cart into the ring for yet another awkward finish, where it looked like Mathis got crippled here, but it was Vortex who was the one that had to be helped to the back. Business finally picked up in TOD 12 and in a big way as Danny Havoc took on Takumi Tsukamoto. These guys were firing on all cylinders with everything they did looking like it hurt like hell. The ironic thing is this match was clocked in at the shortest in the entire tournament, but it was fast-paced and it finally had that solid ending we were looking for. Okay, so at this point you may be thinking, why in the world is TOD 12 rated this high when all we've seen is one standout match? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is because the Danny Havoc and Scotty Vortex finals tore the house down in a 444 light tubes match. We got nearly 20 minutes of these guys destroying each other, and nobody wanted to stay down. Some people may not love the fact that Lucky 13's fiance got involved as well as Drake, but I think it all played out perfectly for the story that CZW was telling at that time. I think that's a major thing a lot of death match tournaments lack in that story, because I may be in the minority here, but I loved all of this. In the end, Danny Havoc won his second TOD trophy in what I think was one of the best TOD finals ever. Mark it down. This is a must-watch match, period. And personally, I think it was a shame that a lot of these other matches weren't more memorable, because this tournament could have landed near the top of this list if they were. Number 15, Tournament of Death 5. This was the first TOD to spice up the structure of the tournament, which some people disliked over the years, but I thought it was one of the unique things that made Tournament of Death stand out from the others. Round 1 saw 4 triple threat matches where only one person would be eliminated after being pinned or submitted. I was impressed with Andy Sumner in this first match against Brandon Profit and Nick Gage, and Profit was the new hyped guy making his TOD debut, but I'm just a little sad Sumner was the one that ate the pin. Actually, looking back, this tournament was chock full of CZW and TOD debuts, because another guy making his CZW debut on this show was Drake Younger, and you may have heard of him before. Him and JC Bailey would advance next over the Hall of Famer Lobo, who, believe it or not, this would be his only TOD match ever. The match itself was alright, it had a couple cool spots, but there was nothing to write home about. But I will say, you cannot go wrong when you get Necro Butcher, Toby Klein, and Brain Damage in the same match. As you would probably expect, this match delivered in a big way and even saw Mr. Insanity take flight. It would end up being several sick punches, though, that would end up eliminating him. DJ Hyde and Danny Havoc made their official TOD debuts here and would actually eliminate Zandig from the tournament after a screw job from that damn Maven Bentley. And if you guessed the fans were not happy about this, not in the slightest, you would be 100% correct. But to be fair, I think Zandig was asking for it with whatever he was doing with his hair at this time. Round 2 saw 2 4-way matches, with 2 wrestlers being eliminated in those matches. Brandon Profit and shockingly the Necro Butcher were eliminated in an alright but forgettable match. Nick Gage and Brain Damage would be the ones to move on to the finals, and honestly, the main thing I remembered from this match was Brain Damage jumping the rail, trying to fight a fan, and of course, Necro getting knocked the fuck out. In what kind of turned into a tag team match after DJ Hyde and Danny Havoc joined up with Maven Bentley in the first round, JC Bailey and Drake Younger would end up eliminating both of them. And I liked what I saw. There were a lot of really cool spots in this match, and I know Danny Havoc took a hell of a beating here. I'm not blowing any smoke, and I'm probably not the only one who had this reaction, but I remember the feeling sitting in that crowd live right after this match thinking both Havoc and Younger had bright futures with this company. Luckily, I was right. Now on to the finals, we saw a 4-way elimination match that ended up going all over the place. Brain Damage would be eliminated first, but to me this marked the moment that he locked in his CZW mainstay status. Drake Younger also won the fans over with his performance, but he was eliminated along with JC Bailey when Nick Gage begrudgingly jumped off of the moving truck, crashing onto both of them. I feel like I glossed over Gage in this tournament, but looking back, his involvement didn't really stand out until the finals. That being said, nobody was more over in CZW at the time than the man. He won his first and only TOD trophy here, and it was clear this win meant a ton to Gage as he celebrated with all the fans. Number 14, Tournament of Death 16. Not too many TODs see every first round match outshine the rest of the tournament, but that's exactly what happened here with TOD 16. Right off the bat, Jeff Cannonball and G Raver tried their best to steal the show, and I thought they came really close because there were so many insanely brutal looking spots, but then again, there were several other ugly moments that just acted as that counterbalance. Clint Margera made the most of his only TOD appearance to date, trying to take out Connor Claxton with this barbed wire trampoline, but it wouldn't be enough, and he was sent packing. We got a pretty decent match here with a good finish, and I don't think you can ask for more than that. Jesus Christ was the crowd rabid for Schlack in his TOD debut here against Masada. The best way I could describe this match would be a high-speed car crash that wasn't anywhere near perfect, but damn was it fun to watch. Their intensity was unmatched here, and the crowd fucking loved it. Jimmy Havoc came into this tournament I'm talking mega hyped up, and I remember this being my introduction to him at the time. He, along with Ricky Shane Page and John Wayne Murdoch, put on one hell of a triple threat match. Though I will say I thought it was a little weird to see the hyped up Havoc steal the win after a Deep South destroyer. So Havoc moved on to face Masada in round number 2. In their match, it was alright, but sadly a stubborn table followed by a weak ending left a sour taste in the fans' mouth, and nothing really made this stand out over anything in the first round. Jeff Cannonball and Connor Claxton brawled all throughout the fans and had yet another decent match, but yet again, nothing in round 2 matched that quality from the first round. Coming into the finals, we had Connor Claxton take on the UK deathmatch sensation, Jimmy Havoc. After looking back at its history, I think this is one of the forgotten TOD final matches, or at least one that I think generally goes under the radar, but it wasn't bad at all. I mean, I'm not saying it's one of the most memorable by any means, but there was plenty of good back and forth action with everything going smoothly except maybe that massive cut on the shoulder blade of Jimmy. The first but not last wrestler from the UK took the trophy back home, well, not quite. And overall, this Tournament of Death won't blow you away, but the finals is worth a watch, as well as the first round for sure. But as for those semifinals, not so much. Number 13, Tournament of Death 13. This was dubbed the CZW versus Big Japan Wrestling Tournament of Death, and now while we approach the top 10 TODs, we still did have a couple of subpar matches here in the first round. The fans bring the Dildos match between Lucky 13 and Jockey Numazawa. It got a few chuckles out of me, but besides that, there really wasn't that much to it. Masada versus Arrow Boy was fine, but it got a little sluggish, with Masada getting about 95% of the offense in here. It made me feel like I was watching a snuff film at one point. I will say we did have 2 solid matches here in the first round though. The first one was Masashi Takeda versus Danny Havoc. These guys kept the pace up, seeing tons of brutal looking spots. Now this would be Takeda's second and last TOD appearance, and even though he exited early, he left on a high note. Matt Tremont stepped into the ring for the very first time with Jun Kasai in a dream death match. I will say this match lived up to that hype, and I can't believe this was only a first round match. A big splash sent the Crazy Monkey to the next round, but one day we will realize just how important this match really was. Round 2 was a mixed bag. Masada and Lucky 13 had its moments, but some awkward miscues really held this one back. Meanwhile, Danny Havoc and Jun Kasai turned in another rock-solid death match for TOD 13. A little side note, I gotta point out this lady in the front row as Kasai stripped down. Somehow, she didn't like what she was seeing. In the end, though, Kasai picked up that win and would be heading to the finals to take on Masada. Up to this point, Masada's first 2 matches weren't really his best work, but this finals match goes down as one of his top 10 CZW performances. I mean, that's just my opinion. Him and Jun Kasai would go to war for 30 minutes in the longest match in TOD history. This was back and forth, and this thing built to a gigantic ending, placing this as one of the better finals in Tournament of Death. In the end, though, BJW prevailed over CZW as Jun Kasai won the 13th Tournament of Death. There were a couple duds sprinkled in, but we were also treated to a couple heavy hitter matches, so don't sleep on TOD 13. Number 12, Tournament of Death 17. Here's a little useless trivia for you. TOD 17 is the only Tournament of Death up to this point that has been held in the state of New Jersey. Now, TOD 17 opened up with a clusterfuck 5-way elimination match. It wasn't pretty, but this match definitely had its moments. Casanova Valentine ended up getting eliminated first, followed by Stockade, followed by Schlack, and then how crazy was this finish right here? Jimmy Lloyd put an exclamation point on this roller coaster of a match, putting G Raver away. As we get through this thing, you're going to see this was one hell of a TOD debut for Jimmy Lloyd. The other first round matches would be decent, but nothing really great. Mance Warner outlasted the Young Dragons, Josh Crane, and Dale Patricks in an elimination 4 Corners of Pain match. And like I said, this was decent, but dear Lord, did it seem to just last forever. And after everything these guys went through, it was a little awkward to see it just end with a lariat. Ricky Shane Page had a field day with Drew Parker, tossing him around at will at points. I gotta say, in the end, Parker looked great in his CZW debut. I'm just a little surprised he never returned after this one match because the fans were chanting for him to come back. To finish out the first round, Connor Claxton wiped himself and Kit Osborne out of the tournament with this insane scaffold barbed wire trampoline spot, leaving Brandon Kirk to pin Dan O'Hare to advance. After 4 solid first round matches, round 2 proved to keep things going strong as Jimmy Lloyd and Mance Warner continued to show out. Brandon Kirk and Bailey Shane Page also rocked it out with quality performances, but it didn't quite stand out over that Lloyd and Warner match. With Ricky Shane Page getting the win, we were set for the finals where we would get another great performance from Jimmy Lloyd, who used this tournament to solidify his name in the deathmatch scene. He took every advantage of this opportunity, and who better than Ricky Shane Page to do it with? These guys turned in a memorable main event with a huge DVD finish off the scaffold. The crowd went home very happy seeing the up-and-comer Jimmy Lloyd leave with that trophy. Overall, this was a sneaky good Tournament of Death. Now, sure, it wasn't perfect by any means, but I believe this is one of the underrated TODs in its history, so go out of your way if you haven't seen it to watch Tournament of Death 17. Number 11, Tournament of Death 10. From this point in the rankings, we have crossed that bridge from decent TODs to good TOD events. Tournament of Death 10 kickstarted with Masada squaring off against Dysfunction in what would be Dysfunction's last TOD appearance. This was just a solid death match right here, and even though you will see him later in the rankings, I just want to point out Dysfunction was a sleeper TOD performer. He's had 3 appearances and, in my opinion, never disappointed once. The next match saw a passing of the torch as Matt Tremont made his Tournament of Death debut against the TOD 4 winner, and up to this point, a man who has competed in 7 of the 10 TODs. I'm talking about the Necro Butcher. This was a great hard-hitting match, seeing Tremont make the best of his first TOD opportunity. And with this loss, we would not see Necro return to TOD until TOD 19. Jockey Numazawa ended up beating Danny Havoc in arguably the second best match on the card. I was shocked to see Havoc eliminated this early, but at least he turned in a quality, I'm talking quality performance here. Another BJW wrestler making their TOD debut scored a win against a CZW vet. That would be Masada Masashi Takeda, who took Scotty Vortex out here in the first round. And keep in mind, Vortex won the previous year's TOD. I gotta say, this was a really great first round, and even though the second round didn't quite come off as good, it didn't disappoint. Masada practically murdered Tremont with this shopping cart, and then you gotta add in the multiple Kenzan stuck into his head. Like I said, Tremont really did make a statement here, but he couldn't get past the fan favorite Masada, who simply could not be stopped. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of expected more out of the two BJW stars, Jaki Nuwazawa and Masashi Takeda, who were up next. The match wasn't bad per se, but it happened to be the weakest on the day, I think. Takeda snagged the victory heading to the finals to face off against Masada. This won't go down as an all-time great TOD final, but I thought this was a very satisfying conclusion. We got several awesome looking glass spots, and we got a little fire mixed in too. As for the ending, by the way, Jesus Christ, that had to hurt. Strong finish here to a good match, and overall, this is definitely worth your time. Masada took home his first TOD trophy and was proving why he was going to be the top guy in CZW for years to come. Number 10, Tournament of Death 4. We head back to 2005 for the last Tournament of Death with Eric Gargiulo and John House on commentary together. In this first round, we would see 6 matches with only 2 of them not quite hitting that quality mark. After Sexy Eddie's outstanding TOD3 showing, I expect a little more out of him, especially with JC Bailey in this match, but it didn't quite measure up. I will say though, it was a hell of a lot better than what most consider the worst TOD match in history though. Brain Damage would make his TOD debut along with Beef Wellington, who made it clear he was not a deathmatch wrestler. I mean, he said it himself in the post-match interviews. Just listen to what he had to say.
It was horrible, and we'll pretend it never happened. Thank you. Anybody got Kool-Aid?
So besides those matches, round 1 saw Toby Klein and Madman Pondo just about steal the show. I'm telling you right now, this was a great match, and you need to see it. Ian Rotten would return to step in as a replacement for Homeless Jimmy to turn in a quality rematch with the Necro Butcher from their TOD2 match. But this time, though, it would be the Necro Butcher who would take the victory. Nick Gage and Spider Nate Webb pulled out all the stops in an awesome match that had a spectacular finish. By the way, I hate how brief I'm being here, but I'd be breaking these matches down all day long, so I promise you these matches are worth your time. The last match in round 1 would be a handicap match where Zandig took on both Robbie Marino and Eddie Kingston, but I mean, you might as well add in Ruckus and a returning Joker into this thing as well. This was just a brutal match here, seeing Blackout prove themselves to the boss that they are willing to get ultra violent. And I don't think I've ever seen someone get hit with a crutch harder than this.
On the outside, he's whipping him. He's beating him like he just tried to leave and go to XPW or something.
In round 2, we got Necro Butcher versus Brain Damage, and I mean, it was all right. Nothing great here, and I'm just glad Zandig decided to bring Brain Damage back after this because honestly, this was not the best TOD debut. But Zandig versus Toby Klein was good. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of light tube log cabin matches, I do like the thought of some match variety. And I will say, these two did make the best out of this match stipulation. Alright, hot take alert here, but in my opinion, TOD4 was Nick Gage's best overall TOD showing. Yes, I know he almost died at one point, but I'm talking about match quality here. Him and JC Bailey turned in the best match of round 2, just as Gage and Webb, I think, turned in the best match in round number 1. He would secure the win to move on to the finals to face off against the Necro Butcher and the boss, John Zandig. Gypsy Joe came in to ref this finals, which I believe will go down as one of the most memorable TOD matches of all time. This match had it all. I'm talking slugfest, freshly squeezed lemons, ultra-violent brooms, insane amounts of light tubes, like a lot of light tubes, and yeah, fire. And yes, that is Nick Gage consumed by flames right there. Admittedly, Zandig's elimination was a little on the weak side, but somehow Gage continued in this match and ate this slam through several layers of glass to finally be put down. What a wild ride TOD4 was here. We had Nick Gage backstage tending to some serious burns, while the Necro Butcher picked up his first and only Tournament of Death trophy. Number 9, Tournament of Death 2. Wow, this has to be the hardest tournament to rank in all of TOD's legacy. On one hand, this show saw one of the most infamous moments in all of independent wrestling, But then again, due to that moment, we got a very weak main event that was actually a miracle it even took place. This tournament revolved around CZW versus IWA Mid-South, a feud which I think it's safe to say turned out really well in the end. In the first round, Spider Nate Webb and Zandig, it kind of took forever to get going, but it did contain a few cool spots, and overall, there just wasn't much to see here. I felt like Nick Mondo and JC Bailey had fantastic chemistry as they put on arguably the best match in the first round. And I say arguably because I'm going on record right now to say the Necro Butcher and Corporal Robinson match was way too overlooked at the time. The strikes really stood out to me as looking stiff as hell, but then you also had Necro's tongue being stapled to the top turnbuckle, and they even ended this thing with a bang. This match was quick, it was hard hitting, and I think it's definitely an underrated match in TOD history. Nick Gage versus Ian Rotten wasn't bad at all. We got some good old-fashioned fork stabbing, some barbed wire boards, and even a Nate Hatred run-in to continue the whole high five story that was going on. I mean, just top-notch stuff here. Round 2 got started out on the right foot with Ian Rotten versus Necro Butcher. Now this wasn't perfect by any means, but after giving Necro a concussion, Rotten took the win, moving on to the finals. Then up next, it happened. Yep, the big one. And besides that big moment, let's not kid ourselves here, nobody really remembers much from the Nick Mondo and Zandig match. It was one of those 2 out of 3 light tube log cabin deals. So during this match, Zandig and Mondo took the fight up onto the roof of Rack's Bar and Billiards. From there, Zandig would hoist Mondo up over his head for a mother effing bomb, and the rest is history. I've already referenced some of the scariest moments in TOD history, but this has to be the #1 scariest and, I will say, most badass moments in all of CZW's history. I mean, both guys almost died, but they somehow, some way, made it back into the ring where Mondo chucked a log cabin of tubes onto Zandig to win the match. Listening back to all the shoot interviews on this night, Mondo should never have stepped foot back through that curtain, but he did it, and he did it in the finals to take on Ian Rotten. Mondo said it himself, he was completely out of it, and you could kind of tell here. Ian would walk Mondo through the parts of this match piece by piece, and yes, the match wasn't superb, but dear Lord, how could it be? In the end, Nick Mondo would win, becoming a death match wrestling icon, and then would retire immediately after that. I will say this was just a good quality show match-wise, but that bump off the roof, man, that helps land this show solidly in the top 10 TODs. Number 8, Tournament of Death 1. They say it's always hard to beat the original, and Tournament of Death is no exception. Having said that, the first round was a little wonky at the start. I feel like I need to get that clear right off the bat. Zandig was slated to face Nate Hatred in the first round, which, by the way, I think would have been an awesome match, but Lobo's army ran down to disrupt the match. With Lobo's power and control of CZW at the time, he declared Adam Flash would now be entered into the tournament to face whoever was in the back to replace the Zandig and Hatred match. In a massive surprise, outran the Messiah.
Jesus Christ! He's back! He's back! Carlito's way! Carlito's way! That is the Messiah! What is he doing here?
For those of you who don't know the story, this was right after Messiah was legit attacked in his home and invaders cut his thumb off. I do feel a little weird rating this stuff because it was more of an angle than it was a match, but the return was massive as you just heard. With Messiah obviously winning, we move on to 2 future CZW Hall of Famers who would go to battle as Wifebeater took on the debuting Necro Butcher. It may be a little surprising that this match was not extremely memorable even for its time, but the ending, it was well received. Another guy you just may know was making his CZW debut, Mr. Insanity, Toby Klein. Him and Nick Gage put on a decent death match, which had no real weak points, but it also didn't really stand out either. Business finally started to pick up in the last match of the first round, as we got yet another debut from Homeless Jimmy squaring off against Sick Nick Mondo. This match was actually good before we got to that infamous spot, by the way. I know the main chunk of the match is always forgotten, but it was good even before that crazy finish. But we gotta talk about it. So Mondo and Jimmy climbed up onto a nearby Ryder moving truck and the rest is history. Mondo would hit an assault driver off the top of that truck onto multiple tables and tubes to score the win. You know what? Let's go back. Let's listen to the call and listen to the CZW fans.
Excuse me, but I think we got a death on our hands. It's over! My God, what are they thinking? What is going through their minds? Are these men mentally sane? Are they mentally able to compete in a tournament?
No exaggeration here, that may be the #1 unforgettable moment in all of CZW's history. Heading into round number 2, though, Nick Gage versus Wife Beater was fast-paced and saw several top-tier uses of different panes of glass. It was short, but it was very, very sweet, and the Wife Beater advanced in a big way. The fans were so incredibly excited to see the Messiah that he was actually the fan favorite over Nick Mondo in the round 2 match. With everything going on, this match was just pure amazing. The crowd was electric, these guys took insane bumps and would just keep going. Lobo's army returned to make a run-in attack on the Messiah, which I actually think helped out since he wasn't going to be going on to the finals. I only say that because there's just no way he was going to be able to lose clean with how big this return was. And I mean, hey, it made for a great story down the road that would skyrocket Messiah to the top of the company. So Nick Mondo would be the one to advance heading to the finals to put on one of, if not the best, TOD finals ever. And I know it's crazy to say that this may have been the best finals ever, and it happened in the first ever tournament, but it's true. 200 light tubes would be used in brutal and innovative ways at the time, as these two delivered a CZW Classic deathmatch. The ending also happens to be one of the sickest and most iconic shots of all time. Wife Beater used his trademark weed whacker to rip apart the flesh of Mondo. Now the lighting really helped showcase how insane this shot was. You could see the blood mist just fly through the air. One last Chokenstein would do Mondo in as Wife Beater became the first ever Tournament of Death winner. Now look, the starting angle in the first couple of matches were a little bit on the weaker side, but this show was loaded on the tail end, and it easily pushes into the top 10 TODs of all time. Number 7, Tournament of Death 6. Before I even get started on this show, just know if you go back to watch this event, please mute the damn thing. Derek Frazier is insufferable on commentary and absolutely hurts the quality of this show. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get on to the important stuff. The first round saw Danny Havoc stepping in as a replacement to beat up Scotty Vortex, who was making his TOD debut. Both of these guys would have much better matches down the line, but this one, it was just alright. That General Order 24 ending, though, was awesome. I think the Insane Lane and Freak Show match gets lost in the mix with a lot of these other great matches on this show, but both of these guys turned in a quality performance in their CZW debuts. Lane would get that win with a barbed wire back crossface, which we would see different versions of this finish in TOD for years to come. I have to say the weakest match in the opening round probably went to DJ Hyde and Madman Pondo. This match did have a couple of cool moments, but overall, I think it's skippable. The rest of the first round was stacked with high quality matches. I'm talking Brain Damage and Toby Klein. It was just great. I remember really liking this match at the time, but going back and watching this now, this has to be one of my favorite matches from the entire tournament. I highly recommend this match. It's so damn hard-hitting and is a must-watch for sure. Another guy making his CZW debut was Die Hard Dustin Lee, and holy hell, him and Drake Younger put on an absolute clinic. I'm not kidding here, this was a phenomenal debut for Die Hard, who just like Drake did at TOD 5, he earned himself a spot on the roster with this one. Bringing a close to the first round, Zandig would lose to the Necro Butcher in an outstanding no-ropes barbed wire death match. A lot happened in this match that looked brutal, but for some reason the thing I will always remember was this boot spot. Necro cracked Zandig in the back of his head with his boot, and it almost started a legit fight between the two. To me, this was a special match, and it's crazy to think that Zandig would only have 4 more matches in CZW after this.
Thank you, Zandig! Thank you, Zandig! Thank you, Zandig!
Round 2 kicked off with yet another really good match, this one between Drake Younger, DJ Hyde, and Danny Havoc, three guys who would go on to be the future of CZW. This match was all over the place, but with elimination weed whacker rules, someone had to get sliced up before any eliminations could occur. And unluckily for DJ Hyde, he would be the first to be taken out. Then an awesome looking Drake's landing would soon put an end to Danny Havoc's day as well. To see who would face Drake in the finals, Insane Lane, Necro Butcher, and Brain Damage pulled off a decent Fans Bring the Weapons match, but an early Necro elimination just seemed to kill the crowd. Now, a sloppy ending didn't help matters either, but you could tell the fans were not happy. The finals would see a 200 light tube lumberjack match, and this match actually featured the infamous nipple spot where Drake nearly had his nipple ripped off. Drake would be taped up though and would continue the match without missing a beat. By the way, the rules to this match were completely different from any other Tournament of Death. In order to win, you had to climb up onto this moving truck, grab onto the trophy, and the person who brings that trophy back into the ring will be declared the winner. A lot of people didn't really like this concept and kind of crapped on this match, but I was kind of a fan of how it was done. Once onto the roof, Drake grabbed the trophy, but Brain Damage knocked him down through tables and light tubes. Just brutal looking stuff here, but the part that I liked was the creativity to have the ladder get knocked down, preventing Brain Damage from following up. Drake stumbled back to the ring as Maven Bentley tried to get the ladder up for his guy to climb down, but by then it was too late. Hey, I get that it was different, and I understand the people that want to hate on it. I just like the creativity of how this finish helped the finals stand out among some of the others we've seen. Overall, though, I think there was a lot to like in this tournament with very few poor matches. This tournament win would strap that rocket ship to Drake Younger to shoot him off into that main event scene in CZW for pretty much the rest of his career. Number 6, Tournament of Death 21. This is the most recent TOD as of this recording at least, and boy did it feel like the spirit of Tournament of Death was revived here after several years of, dare I say, lackluster events. The first round was pretty damn incredible, but I'm not saying it was perfect. The opening Madman Pondo and Tarzan Duran match didn't quite set the seats on fire, unlike Pondo's hair, by the way, which was set on fire for a brief moment. We saw Blood Fighter versus Blood Fighter up next as Judge Joe Dredd and Joel Bateman put on a great match, seeing each man give everything they had in that ring with one of their best friends. Then we had two UK representatives battling it out in one of my favorite matches of this entire tournament. It was Big F and Joe and Danny Darko. They tore the entire ultra-violent underground apart. I don't think I can recommend this match enough. It was nearly 20 minutes of these two just non-stop beating the hell out of one another. To round out this fun first round, we would see a pissed off Mickey Knuckles face JJ Escobar in a road rage death match. They barely even touched the ring, but no joke, this was one of the most memorable CZW matches in recent memory. I mean, they had the fans help JJ flip Mickey over in a car, for God's sake. Round 2 did have a weaker Madman Pondo versus Judge Joe Dredd match, but it was passable, nothing really bad, nothing really great here. Mickey Knuckles versus Big F and Joe, on the other hand, was super solid, seeing Mickey take a ton, and I mean a ton of punishment. She did win with a surprise roll-up, but then was assaulted again after the match, causing her to walk into this main event way less than 100%. This is some of that story stuff that these tournaments have been missing, not to mention this would be Mickey's third straight TOD Finals appearance. And having said that, this right here was the start of the TOD 21 Finals.
And Mickey immediately!
Oh my God. We were treated to even more drama here as Mickey was being helped to the back by the medical staff. Judge Joe Dredd demanded DJ Hyde come back out and hand him over the trophy. Mickey would later return from the back, refusing to go out like that, with the crowd fully behind her, and Dredd, by the way, was getting booed more than anyone in recent CZW history. Now on top of the scaffold, Mickey and Dredd would fall and come crashing down into the exploding light tube table. Mickey once again was knocked out, just like in TOD 19 when she fell from the top with Bobby Beverly. This time, however, she landed on top of Judge Joe Dredd and ended up pinning him for the win. From top to bottom with very few weak points, I have to say this was an impressive Tournament of Death, and if you missed the last several TODs recently, you need to go back and watch this one. After 3 straight years and 3 straight finals, Mickey Knuckles finally went home with that Tournament of Death trophy. Number 5, Tournament of Death 8. Yep, this is the only TOD to actually involve a death, luckily though, only temporary. Nick Gage kicked off the tournament in a no-roped barbed wire fire match against Cult Fiction's Deranged, and despite the crowd being super duper amped up, this match wasn't really that good, but it did have a few moments here and there, and the fire spots actually worked out pretty well, which isn't always the case. 3 friends, including Scotty Vortex, OMG, and the CZW World Champion Drake Younger, were up next to fight one another in a thumbtack kick pads match. In this match, it was just alright. It got a little sloppy at times, but the hard kicks and the damn brutal finish helped save it. Cult Fiction would take another big loss as Wax ended up scoring a major upset over Toby Klein. Sadly, this would be just another match that gets lost in the shuffle with nothing real memorable coming from it. Dysfunction would be out next to challenge the previous year's TOD7 winner, Danny Havoc. I hope I get the point across in this video that I believe people sleep on Dysfunction's TOD matches, because this would be another very strong outing from him. Danny Havoc would get that win to advance though, but Dysfunction won the fans over in his TOD debut, getting that impressive "please come back" chant. Jon Moxley, yes, that Jon Moxley, entered the Tournament of Death next to take on one of the hardest hitters in all of CZW. I'm talking Brain Damage. The majority of this match was solid enough, but there was one spot in particular that carved its way into the deathmatch wrestling iconic spotlight. Brain Damage would pull out a Sawzall, hold Moxley down, and do this. At the time, this was one of the sickest spots I had ever seen in a deathmatch. Come to find out years later in a shoot interview, Moxley revealed it was a fake blade and that he didn't feel anything. Even knowing it wasn't real, it looked completely legit, and if anything, that gives it bonus points in my book, knowing that it was actually safe. So yeah, safe to say that one spot alone boosted this match up as a memorable one. Rounding out the first round, we would have one of the best TOD matches ever, hands down, and much to the fans' dismay, it involved DJ Hyde. And I'm just gonna say it, him and Thumbtack Jack were fucking amazing. Just about everything here looked great. This had great light tube spots, breathtaking fire spots, the first syringe spots in CZW, to the best of my memory at least, and one of the roughest looking cinder block spots ever too. I mean, it kind of had it all. Hands down, amazing match. Go watch it right after this video if you haven't seen it. Round 2 had 2 really good triple threat matches that carried the tournament on nicely, but nothing outstanding like we got in the first round. Nick Gage advanced past Scotty Vortex and Jon Moxley, and like I said, just good stuff all around here. Thumbtack Jack would also be headed to the finals after beating Danny Havoc in what looked to be an extremely gassed Wax. So this TOD Finals happens to be one of the most talked about matches in CZW. Nick Gage and Thumbtack Jack, it started off pretty normal. I would even say it was going just a little slow, but typical deathmatch wrestling stuff here until this happened. Yeah, very reminiscent of that time Drake Younger almost lost his nipple at TOD 6. Nick Gage opened up a massive cut under his armpit. Thankfully, he went straight to the back, but it brought the match to a confusing halt because not everybody saw what happened. While Gage was in the back with medical staff, a lot happened next, including a bunch of people just coming out to the ring, beating the hell out of Thumbtack Jack. During this confusion, it looked like a battle royal was about to happen. DJ Hyde ended up getting tossed out of the ring. It looked like Zandig won the tournament, but then he handed the trophy over to Jack, crowning him the TOD winner. All of that was going on while Nick Gage fought for his life backstage. It was chaotic, it was scary, and thankfully Nick Gage survived in the end after he apparently legitimately died for several minutes at one point. I'm not gonna lie, this was an extremely hard tournament to place with loads of horrifying and legendary moments, but also it had a few slow patches followed by that freak accident of a finish. Number 4, Tournament of Death 9. This was the first Tournament of Death under DJ Hyde, and it's safe to say he did a great job putting the show together. I mean, it's hard to start a tournament off better than Danny Havoc taking on a returning JC Bailey. Hell, this could easily been a finals match, and these two fought like it was, turning in one of the best matches on the entire show. Any other time with Havoc losing in the first round, it's going to be a shocker, but Bayley returning to the company as one of the top heels, this made perfect sense. BJW's Abdullah Kobayashi made his United States debut, taking on the man, Nick Gage. At the time, this match introduced me to seeing a wrestler just eat a light tube, and it was freaking amazing, but sadly, I feel like that happens every other match now, but at the time, this was wild to see. And I may be completely wrong here, but I don't remember Kenzen's ever being used in CZW up to this point either. This would be another great match, with Kobayashi getting a lot of hate from the fans coming in, but he won them over right away. In a kick pads and panes of glass match, Scotty Vortex and Dysfunction had a quick, fast-paced match which left me wanting more. I mean that in a positive way, by the way. They both did a great job here with the short amount of time they had. It may have been cut a little short due to this bad cut Dysfunction got. I'm not sure though, but either way, they ended it strong. I believe the weakest match of the tournament ended the first round as Cult Fiction's Masada took on Devin Moore. It's funny because I don't think this match was really that bad, but the crowd absolutely hated it. Mainly because Zandig was scheduled to face Masada, and they were disappointed when Moore came out instead. With the apparent no-show, it seemed like these guys were thrown off a bit as the crowd chanted for Zandig nearly the entire match. Business picked right back up though in round 2 with Abdullah Kobayashi versus JC Bayley. We got several brutal moments in this 3 out of 5 light tube log cabin match. Cult Fiction's JC Bayley would be the first to advance to the finals after a really good match here. Both of these guys were drenched in blood from head to toe. Wow, they don't call Masada the ultra-violent beast for nothing. He beat the living shit out of Scotty Vortex during this next match. At points, I thought these two had serious problems with each other. I mean, listen to this.
They absolutely tortured each other. Oh, it's like that! Jesus Christ!
I think they showcased that perfect story of a smaller underdog not giving in to the bigger, badder bully. Believe it or not, Vortex was able to withstand that punishment, dropping Masada on his neck and then rolled him up to take the win. That set up for an awesome story in the finals between two guys who always turn in high-quality death matches, one the top returning heel and the other a soon-to-be main event babyface. And just as expected, this was a high-quality death match where they would execute several different finishes, but they would keep kicking out. Eventually, after being completely exhausted, Vortex would awkwardly land one final Spanish fly to score the victory and secure his first and only Tournament of Death trophy. You know, this was probably the first TOD from start to finish with no bad or mediocre matches. Sure, the Zandig no-show was a bit of a letdown, but overall, I don't think this really had anything bad. I know Vortex would end up taking the trophy home, but I do want to give a nod to JC Bayley, who would pass away a couple of months later. These would be his last ever matches during this show, and one of my personal favorites over the years. I'm proud to see him end on such a high note. 3 great matches to close it all out. Number 3, Tournament of Death 11. Even before the show started, there was a nice, dramatic, and emotional intro that quite frankly had me wondering why this doesn't ever get done more often. I mean, I think I know the answer, and that's that Pancoast Productions was involved with this, but that extra effort goes a long way in making something feel special. Speaking of special, my God, learn how to properly Irish your cameras, people. The whole start to this tournament was completely blown out, and it kind of looked atrocious. And I think that's a shame because this opening 3-way drunken scaffold match was some entertaining stuff featuring Lucky 13, Danny Havoc, and Devin Moore. There was a great mix of quality wrestling mixed in with ultra violence, and we didn't even need to wait till the finals to get that awesome looking scaffold finish. Rory Mondo versus Drake Younger wasn't the cleanest of death matches by any means, but the highlights I think outweighed its faults by far. Rory held his own for the most part, but Drake was able to really carry this match into that next level, making this an actual highlight of the tournament. Scott Summers made his one and only CZW appearance in a hard-hitting contest against Masada. These two would put on a respectable match here, but good God did Summers get brutally injured at the end of this thing. It looked like his skull was literally cracked open with this pile driver onto cinder blocks. And the fact that Masada picked him up and gave him one more finishing blow before sending him on his way was just insane. Just absolutely brutal stuff here. I would show you the after-match footage where I think you can actually see a little bit of his skull but I think I'd get demonetized in a heartbeat if I'm not already, actually. We got a classic match to close out the first round when Abdullah Kobayashi returned to CZW to take on Matt Tremont. This was just good stuff. These guys were clearly going all out, but DJ's run-in helped turn the match in Kobayashi's favor, helping lead to the elimination of the Bulldozer. We would kick off the second round with one of the best round 2 matches in all of TOD history. Traditionally, round 2 is kind of overlooked. Danny Havoc and Drake Younger would start slow, building up to them each using each other's finishers on one another, and would escalate to big move after massive move until finally Danny Havoc would no longer be able to stand up. It had some good progression and really stood out in this tournament among the rest. Masada versus Abdullah Kobayashi would try to follow that up, but honestly, they would fall just a little short. I mean, this would still be a decent match though, but Masada would open up a big gash on his forearm with this smash through a pane of glass. Cinder blocks and a bed of nails came into play, and if you had Masada advancing to the finals with a moonsault on your bingo sheet, then great fucking call there. Hurt arm and all, Masada and Drake Younger put on a grueling 20-minute death match clinic. At times, this match got kind of hard to watch as Drake's stomach was impaled by some barbed wire and almost ripped out a chunk of his skin. Now, there was some solid storytelling going on in these finals as Younger focused on Masada's hurt arm, but Masada just refused to give up. I've never done an official rankings before, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is in the top 10 of my favorite no-roped barbed wire matches ever, and all deathmatch wrestling included. Yeah, the barbed wire stole the show here, that's for sure. In the end, Masada forced Drake Younger to tap out, which means Masada made history by being the only person to ever win back-to-back TODs, and he joins Wife Beater and Danny Havoc as the only wrestlers to win 2 TOD trophies. Overall, I think TOD 11 showcased some of the best hybrid deathmatch wrestling out of any other Tournament of Death to date. Number 2, Tournament of Death 15. Quality matches and interesting stories is the best way to describe TOD 15. Admittedly, I don't think any of these matches land in the top 10 of all time, but there were no duds at all along the way. Tim Donst was trying to earn himself a full-time contract in CZW. That added in with this bad blood with Ricky Shane Page made for a great opening match, seeing them brawl all over the ultra-violent underground. Page would win the match, causing Donst to lose control, injuring RSP's leg afterwards. We've seen Masada skewer dozens and dozens of his opponents, but none of them seem more brutal than when Connor Claxton's skull seemed to be impaled in this next match. We got a good and brutal match here between the two, and I'm just going to tell you, Claxton took an absolute beating here. Though I will say a pile driver onto his center block can steal the match away from anybody. Alex Colon made his deathmatch tournament debut next against Danny Havoc, who would be competing in his last Tournament of Death. After 11 official TODs, we're talking 21 matches, 2 trophies. This was one hell of a way to go out. And you know, this may not have been his planned last tournament, but damn if it wasn't good. Colon made a name for himself on this day, but more on him in a minute. We got some more stories that came into play as DJ Hyde handed Jeff Cannonball his spot in the tournament after Cannonball viciously attacked Matt Tremont a month prior, demanding this TOD opportunity. Things got graphic quickly as Kensins came into play, but all you need to know is this was another rock-solid match here, with Cannonball making a name for himself in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, he didn't win, but he did earn himself a ton of respect. The boots would come off in round 2 as Ricky Shane Page battled Connor Claxton barefoot with cinder blocks, a bed of nails, and yeah, hot coals. This match was decent and paced a little slower compared to the rest, but I wouldn't be surprised if this match hurt more than any others on the card. Alex Colon continued to impress as he fought Matt Tremont in the semifinals. Up until this point, Colon wasn't known as a deathmatch wrestler by any means, but he went 2 for 2 in great performances, proving he can hang with the best around. I'm talking Danny Havoc and Matt Tremont. Now, Colon may have been the future in the deathmatch wrestling scene, but Tremont, he was the present. The TOD finals were set as Matt Tremont would try to win back-to-back trophies against one of CZW's brightest and up-and-coming stars, Ricky Shane Page. I mentioned how this would be Danny Havoc's last TOD. Well, it would also happen to be Matt Tremont's last time fighting in the tournament also. He would end it on a high note as him and Ricky Shane Page put on an extremely good match. RSP's performance stands out because somehow, I believe right here, Page was busted open very badly above the eye. I mean extremely badly, like stopped the match bad, but Page had his head wrapped up and somehow continued on. Then not only that, he hoisted Tremont up onto his shoulders with ease, it looked like, on top of a scaffold, and the rest is kind of history.
Oh God! Oh God! Oh God Almighty!
Ricky Shane Page pins the CZW World Champ at the time and would not look back, going on to be a top player in the company soon after. When looking back at TOD 15, I have to say it helped tremendously having each first round match have a little story and not just some random matches thrown together. In my opinion, a lot can be learned from Tournament of Death 15. And number 1, Tournament of Death 3. IWS, based out of Canada, had themselves a little invasion planned for CZW for the third installment of the Tournament of Death. Right out of the gate, we got two guys pretty much unknown to the CZW crowd in the Arsenal and Evil Ninja number 2. They completely won these fans over, and they were booed very heavily to start this thing out, so either way, outstanding match here to kick off the tournament right. One half of the CZW Tag Team Champions Ruckus would stand in for Shadow WX, who couldn't make the event, to take on Nick Gage, and that's some tough luck there. It is no surprise that Ruckus is not a deathmatch guy, but he did put on a decent match here with Gage, but it was nothing to write home about. Madman Pondo also made his TOD debut to take on the Wife Beater, and even though this was a hard-hitting affair, it felt very lackluster, with Wife Beater taking hits and just falling down comically at times. The ending was almost horrible, but Wife Beater did recover to get that win. Sexy Eddie came into TOD oozing charisma as he played the part of a guy who didn't want to get hardcore. Him and Ian Knox had a really entertaining match, largely due to Eddie's reactions, and of course, after getting a little hardcore, Eddie would go on to get that win. Look, I have no clue what happened between Necro Butcher and the Green Phantom, but Jesus Christ, Necro beat Phantom like he owed him a bunch of money. Now, Phantom did get some shots in too, but this match ended up being a pure and utter chaotic beatdown. It ended up being very memorable, and judging by that blood pouring out of that mask, I wouldn't be surprised if Phantom's nose was broken after this thing. To end round 1, Chris Cash and JC Bailey really stood out among the pack as they put on one of the better matches in this entire tournament. Both of these guys were proving themselves at the time as the future of CZW, but unfortunately for Cash, his life was cut short in a motorcycle accident. This would be the only actual Tournament of Death match he would compete in, and I'm proud that he and JC were able to perform at this high of a level. If there was a TOD match tier list, this first match in round 2 would be in that S++ tier. Sexy Eddie embraced the hate as he took on fellow IWS wrestler, the Arsenal. There are those iconic moments from TOD like Nick Mondo and Homeless Jimmy coming off the Ryder truck, or Nick Mondo and Zandig coming off of that roof. Well, here we got the trifecta of Sexy Eddie cutting an artery and shooting his blood into his mouth.
He's squirting blood out of his own body. What a sicko! What a maniac! Where do we find these people, John?
Without a doubt, one of the more legendary visuals in CZW and really all of deathmatch wrestling history. But from bell to bell, this match was one of the best. Simply, it cannot be missed if you are any kind of deathmatch wrestling fan. Honestly, I've never seen anyone go from being that hated to that loved so quickly. So even though Eddie did win the match, he was rushed to the hospital and would have to miss the finals of TOD 3. But the great matches didn't end there, because Wife Beater and JC Bailey put on one of the better 5-minute death matches that you're ever going to see. It was fast-paced, but it did get the job done, and we would see Wife Beater heading to that final round. To see who would join him, Nick Gage and Necro Butcher had a brawl all over the ringside area, and I bet you did not expect to see Lucha Necro in this tournament, did you? The panes of glass were used here in fun ways, leading up to Necro advancing over Nick Gage. Now, Necro Butcher versus Wife Beater wasn't the strongest TOD finals, and it clocked in at just over 6 minutes, but they used every second of that to beat the hell out of each other. Now, the finish would be a memorable one as they climbed up to the top of this moving truck with the tables below set on fire. Wife Beater drove Necro down with a sidewalk slam, and that's a wrap.
It's Wife Beater. It's Wife Beater. Holy shit! Or is it Butcher? It's Wife Beater. I'm telling you, it's Wife Beater.
Wifebeater won his second Tournament of Death trophy and to this day remains undefeated in TOD matches. Looking back, round 1 saw several classic CZW matches, but round 2 hosted one of the best Tournament of Death matches ever. And of course, they ended it all with a bang. Now, I don't think any deathmatch tournament is perfect, and I also don't think it should be, but in my opinion, CZW's Tournament of Death 3 was the greatest Tournament of Death to date. Now, TOD is still going on strong as of this recording at least, so who knows, maybe one day this will all be topped. And there you have it, folks, all 21 Tournament of Deaths that took place over 20 plus years inside the combat zone. And those are, of course, just my rankings. I'd love to hear what you have to say as well. Let me know down below, leave a comment, and we can chat about it. We have seen gallons and gallons of blood spilled over the years, all in the name of one of the most prestigious deathmatch tournaments ever to exist. And that's just why I want to personally thank each and every wrestler who has ever competed in TOD to entertain us. To support these wrestlers and the deathmatch wrestling scene, hit up smartmarkvideo.com, buy the DVDs, and seek out the wrestlers' merch to support them in any way that you can. Don't be a dick and do not be a pirate. Pay the people who work hard to do what we all love. Thanks.
When you hear TOD, you hear the word ultraviolet. You know it's CZW. Get in your fucking car, get in a plane, take a bus, take a train, I don't give a fuck. You get to the show, and we give you what nobody else can.